So it is with great pleasure to welcome everyone. And hello, my name is Juan Luis Belman Guerrero. I am the Director of Student Programming at the Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor at Georgetown University. On behalf of the Kalmanovitz Initiative, I'd like to welcome you to this panel, Social Protection and Global Resilience, that is part of a multi-day convening, Constructing a New Social Compact, a public forum on empowering, a social forum on a public forum on empowering the post-pandemic working class. We hope you'll join us for a number of sessions. We're recording today's sessions. Please join today's discussion by submitting your questions through the chat function. Today's moderator will be Cathy Feingold, who is the International Director for the AFL-CIO and the Deputy President for the International Trade Union Confederation. Now, I'll turn it over to Cathy.
Great. Thanks so much, Juan, and welcome everybody. Good to see you. And thanks to Kalmanovitz Institute for putting together this conference. This is one of the few panels focused on how we bring together the US and the global. And I'm also grateful to our interpreters today. So just as one last reminder, even though the first panelist will be speaking in English, you will need to eventually find the interpretation button at the bottom and choose either English or Spanish. So welcome. And in the spirit of this conference, today's session is focused on looking at what we actually need to do to build a new social contract with workers. Now, some of you probably tuned in to President Biden's speech the other night. Other people may have heard his comments when he said that we need a new social contract to give all workers a fair shot. And that's what we mean when we talk about a new social contract. For the global labor movement, we talk about a new social contract that includes climate-friendly jobs, rights, access to social protection, which is what we're going to talk about today, fostering equality, and building inclusive, sustainable development. So that's the social contract we want for workers in the US, we want for workers around the world. And in order to transform the reality for the majority of the world's workers who work in jobs with low wages, few rights, and very few, if any, social protections, we need to think differently. And we know that we're having this conference, and we're grateful to Kalmanovitz Institute for organizing it because it's happening at such a critical time. As we face the pandemic, we are reminded by what happens when workers do not have the social protection systems we need. But first of all, let me talk about the title of this program, because in the US, for those of you tuning in from the United States, we don't usually use the term social protection. But we often say in our country, social safety net. Overall, what we're referring to is a set of policies that help people manage social risks, like when we have a pandemic, or when there's a hurricane, or when there's massive job loss due to technology or climate change. These are the programs and policies we need that help workers prevent poverty and maintain decent incomes and living standards. A few examples of these kinds of policies: unemployment benefits, maternity benefits, reproductive health, sickness and disability benefits, child, old age benefits, and survivors benefits and social assistance. Just this week in the United States, we heard the Biden administration announce the American Families Act and their commitment to expanding social protection programs in the US. These programs are critical not only for creating a floor of social protection for all workers, but also critical to facilitating a just transition off of fossil fuels. If workers are going to transition, they need this social protection floor. Globally, we know that 255 million full-time jobs have already been lost worldwide since the beginning of the crisis. Another 130 million jobs are at risk in 2021. Expanding social protection is important now more than ever. If we are going to support workers who have lost their jobs and livelihoods from this crisis, and then think about a new economic model that is built around resilience, against future crises, we have to figure out this piece of social protection. And there's actually broad international consensus on the importance of expanding social protection. It is already recognized as a fundamental human right, part of many international human rights instruments, an international labor standard. It is proven, we're going to hear from speakers today about how it contributes to inclusive economic growth. It's already part of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is part of the United Nations Framework for Sustainable Development. It's target 1.3 for those that follow the Sustainable Development Goals. And despite the fact the entire international community agrees that this is an important issue, social protection coverage remains incredibly low around the world. Globally, less than 1/2 of the world has access to any form of social protection. The informal economy workers is usually, many people think that they don't have social protection. Most informal economy workers have very limited social protection and have been excluded, but many more workers who are considered formal workers have very few social protections, if any. So what we're trying to address is to build a system inclusive of all workers. So coverage gaps are linked to persistent financing gaps for social protection. And we know financing challenges are really acute in the world's poorest country. We can get this done. The International Labor Organization has estimated that around $78 billion annually would be needed for a global social protection fund. Now, at first you're saying there are so many challenges in the world, that sounds like a lot, but it is actually a fraction of 1% of global GDP, and it amounts to around 16% of the collective GDP of these countries. So really, we can get this done. We can come together as a global community to help expand global social protection. So today, that is our discussion. How do we think about building this out at the global level? And then we're going to end today hearing about how you can get involved if you are tuning in from here in the US. So I want to introduce the fantastic panelists that we have with us today. Our first speaker, I'll introduce them as they speak, is Isabel Ortiz, Director of the Global Social Justice Program. It's an initiative for policy dialogue at Columbia University. And it is a Joseph Stiglitz initiative on policy dialogue at the university. Before coming to this position, she was director at the International Labor Organization and UNICEF, and senior official at the United Nations and the Asian Development Bank. She has been working and leading the discussion and work around social protection for many years, and we're grateful that she is participating in the program today. Over to you, Isabel, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Cathy and Juan. Okay, so I've been asked to present on the state of social protection around the world, what happens with social protection during the pandemic, and also what is the near future. So I only have 10 minutes, but I'm going to try to make it. Let me share the presentation I have for this. Okay. So I always like to start by presenting a historical perspective. And what you have here, you have these 6 maps. They correspond, the first one to 1900s, the second on the right, 1920, 1940, 1960, 1980, and the last one at the bottom, it is from 2015. Now, you see, the maps go from very clear colors, meaning very few countries had some social protection or social security schemes. And, progressively, you see how countries keep adopting more and more, until we reach to the year 2015, when you can see that the wall is in brighter colors, and it means that at least they have adopted, the world countries keep adopting more and more schemes. When we are talking about social protection or social security, we talk about public systems that address at least 8 schemes. And these include child and family benefits, maternity protection, support for those with no jobs, the unemployed or the poor, employment injury benefits, sickness support, health protection, disability benefits and old age pensions. And as you can see, Social Security or social protection covers from cradle to grave. It's a kind of life cycle approach in which, people that need protection at any time in their life will get it. So that's why we are talking. So these colors that we see here reflect countries that start introducing, at the beginning, they started introducing one scheme, 2, 3, and as the colors keep coming, it means that they keep adopting more. Now you see the last map is actually quite bright. And this means that actually social protection, social security has been a success around the world. It means that countries and governments have been adopting it. And enacting schemes because they are useful to societies and essential part of the social contract. Now, what you can also see in this map is that, as Cathy was saying, there are many countries that are still in lighter colors, and it means that a lot still needs to be done. But I want you now to think something. This fight is not our fight. This is a fight that was started by our parents and by our grandparents. And our generational duty for us at this time is to ensure that the world becomes all in bright colors and that everybody, no matter where they are, they will have access to social protection or social security. So the reality is, despite progress and despite the fact that social security is a human right recognized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and as Cathy was mentioning, is part of the SDGs, SDG 1.3, the fact is that only 45% of the world population has access or is covered by at least one benefit, maybe one or maybe more. But that is, a low number, really, if we want for the type of ambition that we have. So we have a lot to do. And further, if we think how many people will have complete access to all benefits, meaning access to family benefits, disability benefits if they had an accident, or they have been contributing to a good system of old age pensions. So the number of people that have the access to a comprehensive system of social protection is only 29% of the world population. So we have a lot to do. Now, what happens is that when we look at the world again, we see that these coverage gaps are related to underinvestment in social protection. So generally, what this map is showing is how much countries spend in social protection. And the brighter colors mean that they spend from 10% of GDP or more, and the lighter colors, it means less. And as you can see, it's really a match. Coverage gaps are associated to underinvestment in social protection. And Evelyn Astor is going to explain later more about this. Why this is happening? Well, for a number of reasons. Social protection was not seen as a priority by many governments for very long, part of the neoliberal ideology. And then we have been living a decade of austerity cuts since 2010, 2019. So, many cuts have been done to social protection and just leaving the most essential schemes for the poor, but not really expanding social security as it should go to all workers in the informal sector, etc. And so that's the way forward. So what happened during the COVID? The numbers I was presenting before, they're all from the ILO. And if you're interested, this is the best source of global data. So you go to ilo.org and you will find them there. Now, what I'm presenting just now is what happens during the COVID pandemic. The data is also from ILO, but it's latest data. Okay, so what happens, and this is if you look at the graph on the top right, what you have there is the share of countries that had responses on social protection as part of the pandemic response. And as you can see, 92% of the world actually did have social protection schemes launched because of the COVID-19. So very clearly, social protection was perceived as an essential part of a needed response. And most of the responses actually came through in the first wave. This, you look at the graph on the left, the majority of plans were announced in the, March, April, May of 2020. This is during the first wave of COVID-19. And the majority of measures were non-contributory. They were like kind of safety nets, cash transfers, and normally very short term. The average was 3 months, though you have, of course, cases of longer and shorter benefits. So it was a short-term response, which is, much needed, still not sufficient in many places. However, the situation that we have found ourselves now, and I would like to focus the next couple of slides, and I stop here, is what is going to happen in the near future. And perhaps we can discuss that a bit more in the discussion. And what is going to happen, and I come with not very good news, is that what is expected is another big wave of austerity cuts. Why? Well, because what happened is that in 2020, most countries spent a lot to tackle the pandemic, as they should. And then most countries most governments found themselves with large fiscal deficits and increase in debt. So the orthodox solution to that is to enter into a new wave of austerity cuts. Now, this graph that you have here, this is, if you are interested, you can check your own country in this global austerity alert that we have just published. And it is based on IMF fiscal projections. And what you have here in this graph is the number of countries that are forecast to cut public expenditures since, actually this is since 2008, it's a long series, up to 2025. But let's look at the last figures. So you see in 2020, the numbers are very, very low. It means that very few countries are cutting. Of course, 2020, everybody was spending a lot because of to tackle the COVID pandemic. But in 2021, we have 152 countries cutting. This is this year now, that they are going to start contracting public expenditures. And next year, even more, 159 countries. That means that by next year, 85% of the global population will be living under austerity. That means that we have to somehow make the case that austerity is not needed, not now, not ever. Okay. Austerity really is not going, is premature. It should not be conduced. And the reality is that austerity is not really needed, because there are countries and governments have many sources of financing of fiscal space. And these options, there are about at least 8 options that exist even in the poorest countries. So what has happened is that many governments, for a number of reasons, they are working with a very, very small budget. But the reality is that if they were more creative, they will actually expand the budget and have sufficient budget to actually have a significant number of public services for citizens, as well as social protection or social security. Now, we don't have time here to explain this in detail, but there's 8 options, which I'm just going to read. They include increasing tax revenues, and that means avoiding VAT, because this will be regressive consumption taxes. You need to go towards income taxes, wealth taxes that are now being discussed as an option, including taxes to corporate income, and including to the financial sector that is has very limited taxation. And we have fantastic examples all over the world. For instance, in Brazil, put a financial transaction tax, and with that, expanded social protection coverage during 15 years. Unfortunately, it was a change in government that canceled that tax, but because of vested interest pressures. But reality is it can be done, and it is, it's a right thing to do. Then most standard form for social protection, social security, is to increase social security coverage by formalizing those in the formal economy and with good contracts. And that is, we have very good examples also from developing countries. We have in Argentina, Brazil, Tunisia, Uruguay, they have been expanding social protection by formalizing those workers that were in the informal economy with bad contracts. Then you can fight illicit financial flows. You can restructure or reduce your debt, so you are not paying so much in debt, but actually you manage to keep part of these resources for essential investments in the country. You can try to lobby for more aid and transfers. That would be the important case of the Global Social Protection Fund that I think Evelyn might explain a bit more about that. We could tap into fiscal and foreign exchange reserves like Norway or Chile have done. We could adopt a more accommodative macroeconomic framework. That means having some tolerance to inflation or fiscal deficit. And we could reallocate public expenditures from high cost and low social impact expenditures to social protection. And we have with examples, for instance, Costa Rica and Thailand transfer funds from, reallocated funds from defense and the military towards health. So they are good examples. Now, no matter what, these decisions are very important and they cannot be adopted, behind closed doors at the Ministry of Finance, perhaps with some staff from the IMF. What is very important is that these decisions that have an impact on the lives of millions and millions of people, they need to be debated in national dialogue with employers, trade unions, civil society organizations, and it must be public, available for, where everybody can realize the importance of pursuing these avenues of financing so countries can properly develop, social security or social protection and public services for all citizens. So you have more reference about all that here in the presentation. It's mostly from ILO, but I will be very happy to send you any other documents. Thank you very much, Cathy. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. What a great way to start to frame the conversation. And I think I like, not only do you show the challenges, but you also speak about a new vision is possible. And for those of us that were involved in the conversations in 2008 around austerity, one hopes that we have learned our lesson. But I love that you have that list, and I hope we can come back to that list and show that there are actual options to supporting social protection and not having to support this big wave of austerity. What a wake-up call. I will say we already have requests for some of your slides. We'll make sure people get as much information as we can in your hands. Let me now go to Evelyn Astor, who is my sister at the International Trade Union Confederation. She's the advisor on economic and social policy. The International Trade Union Confederation represents over 200 million workers around the world. Evelyn is really the global labor movement's expert. She is my go-to on global social protection work. Currently, she's a member of the Tripartite Advisory Committee for the ILO's Global Flagship Program for Social Protection Floors, and a member of the steering committee of the Global Partnership for Universal Social Protection. She has some new reports, and we'll make sure to put those links in as well. And she's going to tell us more about how we can get this done, how we can support funding and financing a global social protection fund. Over to you, Evelyn, and welcome.
Thanks so much, Cathy. And it's really great to see so many friends, colleagues, allies here today. Good evening to those of you who are on my side of the Atlantic, and good afternoon to those of you in the US. Look, Cathy, Isabel, you've both underlined how social protection is an internationally recognized human right. So there's no need for me to repeat it. But there's so many international commitments to extend social protection. But Isabel really hit the nail on the head when she spoke about the predominant economic theory put forward by some, particularly advanced by international financial institutions, positing that social protection is a drag on the economy and that austerity is needed in order to have healthy public finances. My contribution to this discussion today will be primarily to debunk this myth and to really make the case that no, actually social protection is conducive to a strong as well as inclusive economy, and that austerity is not the way to go. And I will, as Cathy mentioned, also say a couple of words around where I think the international community can do more when it comes to social protection financing for low-income countries. I have a presentation, so I'm going to put my slides up. Give it one moment for it to get ready. Voila. Okay. I'm going to start by doing a little bit of promotional work for a study that came out last week, published by the ITUC, together with Development Pathways and the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, on the economic benefits of social protection. I'll put the links in the chat later. It's available in English, French, and Spanish. And this study does two things. First of all, it's summarizing the existing evidence that exists on the social and economic impacts of social protection. There's a lot of empirical work that has been done at country level, regional level, around health impacts of social protection, employment, productivity, fertility, poverty, inequality. But the intention of this study was really to bring together this evidence and actually come up with a coherent conceptual framework for assessing the potential social and economic impacts of social protection extensions. And then in doing so, actually modeling what the impact would be if we were to invest an extra 1% of GDP on a selection of low and middle income countries. The country looks at 8 countries. The study looks at 8 countries, sorry. And what I'm going to do now is present to you some of the key findings that have come out of that study. First of all, in terms of reviewing the existing evidence on social protection, we tried to draw on some of the existing analysis that had already been done in this regard. So this is actually a chart. This is a chart within the study, but it's actually a chart that was done by Isabel. So it's nice to follow on from Isabel's presentation and to have a bit of a back and forth here in terms of the evidence that we draw on. But this chart actually informed the literature review that was done. It shows a number of interrelated social and economic benefits to social protection that have been empirically demonstrated through different research projects. It looks at how investment in social protection not only provide higher income security for households, but it shows, okay, there have reductions in poverty, but also increases in consumption and aggregate demand, better access in terms of nutrition, food, improved health, improved educational outcomes, reduction in school dropout, better educational performance, but also a better and more productive employment through enabling people to search for jobs at their skill level, enabling people to take some financial risks in terms of starting up a business, with benefits in terms of social cohesion, human development and productivity, what economists like to call human capital development, overall economic growth. And what we've done in the study is also elaborate on some of these benefits, looking also at some additional multiplier effects in terms of increased local production and consumption and the employment and job creation that could stem from that, accumulation of productive capital, et cetera. So this chart, it's already giving you a pretty large picture of the benefits that have been identified in the literature and how they relate to each other. And the study actually expands on this further. Now, when it comes to actually the results of the simulation exercise, we first and foremost, I could say that the results showed quite significant reductions in poverty rates, even with just 1% extra GDP investment in social protection. 12 percentage point decreases in poverty in Bangladesh, over 10% in Rwanda. This is quite significant. Smaller, but still nevertheless significant poverty reduction impacts in other countries. But we can also say overall that the benefits appear to be highest among low-income countries in the study. There are also positive increases in employment based on the simulation. And actually, female employment tends to be affected the most positively. And this has to do, first of all, with the fact that there are some sectors where women tend to be employed more than men that are impacted, for example, in the health sector, in investing in health. It's actually creating some jobs in this sector that will be going predominantly to women, but also in terms of the work-life balance potential of social protection investments, especially when looking at childcare, family leave, preventing women from dropping out of the labor market because of family responsibilities. There's also a rather considerable change in cumulative employment over a 10-year period. And this is really refuting the evidence that has been put forward by a lot of neoliberal economists around how social protection is a disincentive to work and a drag on employment. On the contrary, actually, it's when you simulate the impact based on existing literature, it is actually quite conducive to employment. Tax revenues also increase, both in terms of employment tax revenue due to more people in employment and people in more productive, higher skilled jobs that are higher paid, but also in terms of consumption tax revenue. So this is again pointing to the fact that an investment in social protection would contribute positively towards the sustainability of public finances. And the study also shows positive impacts on economic growth overall. Again, you can see that the impacts are highest among lower income countries, looking at Rwanda and Bangladesh, for example. In fact, the red line shows the level of investment that was made. You can see that the returns actually exceed the investment in a number of countries. On average, the return is actually 1.1 to 1 return on investment. But even in the countries where it doesn't fully pay off, that is not to say that social protection is not useful. Again, it's a human right. But what the study does demonstrate is that the benefits can offset partially, fully, or even more the costs in many cases. So now, I hope that I've been able to make the case in a short period of time of how social protection is a positive contributor towards social and economic development through showing the results of this analysis. But I would like to say a word about the implications of this in terms of international support towards social protection. Cathy already underlined this in the introduction today. There's a social protection financing gap for low-income countries estimated at around $78 billion US. Now, that's really a fraction of global GDP, representing less than 0.25% of global GDP. But when you look at what it represents in terms of the collective GDP of low-income countries, it's rather high. It's 15.9%. And if you look at what that means in terms of the total tax revenue coming from low-income countries, it represents 45%. So what it means is that even though investments to social protection would be incredibly beneficial to low-income countries in terms of supporting their economic and social development, there's a problem in terms of these countries being able to put forward these investments on their own, at least in the short term. Because there are serious financing constraints. If you compare this, for example, to lower middle income countries and upper middle income countries, where here you see the financing gap is much larger, but when it comes to comparing it to their respective GDP or their tax revenue, it's much smaller. So I think that there is really a case for international level solidarity to help catalyze financing for low income countries, at least in the short term. Now, this comes to the point around a global social protection fund. This is a proposal that is currently being discussed at international level by a UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Olivier de Schutter. It's a proposal that's been going on for a long time, but it's actually increased in momentum over the last year. And the idea precisely is to kickstart the setup and development of social protection schemes in the world's poorest countries. But this can be done also to support domestic resource mobilization for social protection. It is not to say that low-income countries don't have any means at their disposal to invest more in social protection, to reallocate existing resources. I mean, Isabel has presented a menu of options that many countries, including low-income countries, can tap into. But at least in the short term, a financing catalyst from the international level could be helpful, and it could be accompanied with some co-financing requirements for low-income countries to contribute what they can. It could be accompanied with technical support to help set up, for example, more effective tax collection, measures to tackle tax evasion, measures to support collection of social security contributions and formalization. It can actually meaningfully support efforts towards domestic resource mobilization. It's not a substitute for it. It is also something that in discussions around international level, it appears that there's an opportunity for greater coordination between international organizations like the ILO, international financial institutions and multilateral development banks, development partners, in coordinating around social protection financing, and also financing more of official development assistance towards social protection. Currently, you have less than 1% of all ODA, overseas development assistance, going towards social protection. That's very little, just when we know how beneficial it is towards development. But also you have very fragmented development programs in many countries, and also a lot of inconsistencies between development programs and international labor standards. So a global fund could actually be also an opportunity to create a coordination mechanism at the international level on how we actually support the financing for social protection. And finally, and I think that this is very consistent with the points raised already by Isabel, a global fund, this is not a top-down, the idea of it is not to sort of put a top-down instrument in saying, okay, you need to establish social protection and this is what the system should look like. It should also actually foster a dialogue at national level around how these schemes should be set up, who should be contributing to them, who should be the main beneficiaries in the first instance. And so a global fund could actually support dialogue between social partners at the national level on how to set up social protection. And we also see a role for social partners and of course other relevant stakeholders at the international level in terms of guiding the strategic direction of a global fund. So in concluding, and just to conclude on this, there are ongoing discussions going on now at the Human Rights Council. There will be also a discussion on social protection at the International Labor Conference this June, discussions that we hope will also lead to conclusions at the G20 and G7 levels. But I would like to end by emphasizing that I really see a global fund as a means towards bridging the divide between those countries with social protection and those who currently lack it. And it can really help to unite this world on a more equitable recovery from this pandemic and provide a path towards a robust and inclusive economic recovery. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Evelyn. And folks should note that I have put the great report that Evelyn helped to author already in the chat box, and it goes over some of the issues she's already raised. So important. And again, at the end of our presentations, I'll give you more information about how to get involved. But we need leaders in the G7, the G20 to hear from all of us that we need them to have the vision. We need them to have the leadership to support the creation of this global social protection fund that would begin to jumpstart social protection systems in the poorest 28 countries. And then here in the US, we're talking about how can we also get our government to increase funding for social protection programs for an expanded number of countries. I want to now go to Eric Manzi, who is currently the Deputy General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation in Africa. He has held that position since January 2020. Previously, he was the Secretary General of the Rwanda Workers' Trade Unions Confederation, known in French as CESTRAR. And he holds other titles. He represents the labor movement. He's a worker delegate at the International Labor Organization governing body, where he has had lots of opportunity to discuss the need for social protection, especially in countries like his own. Welcome, Eric. Thanks so much for being with us late night. Over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, good evening. So I have not, I'm not to share the presentation, but maybe after this panel, I can just readjust something and send to you. The second, I hope I've not, my English is not very good because I'm French speaking, but I think I can try. I would like to share with you on this panel the issue of the lack of social protection in low-income countries and the implication in terms of inclusive and sustainable social and economic development. I will try also to, to present some root causes of that lack of social protection, but also one of the root causes can be the financing of the social protection systems. And finally, if I have enough time, I will give you two examples of my country, Rwanda, about some initiatives when I can prove if you finance well the social protection system, we can achieve more and more. To begin with my presentation is, as you know, it's important and it's known to everyone that low-income countries are among those with the weakest social protection system and very poor coverage. And this has been confirmed with the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of the countries are found in the African continent. I think Isabel presents a map when we will see in Africa many of the country, the system, many of the country in Africa are in the, in the category where the social protection system is under-invested. There is a very low investment in social protection system. But on the other hand, some of these countries have also shown a political will to seek in one way or another to strengthen the social protection system in line with international standards and other commitments made at international level. However, much remains to be done. Why this situation? That's the question. Of course, on close examination, except the particular history and economical structure of each country, already being or classified as a low-income country is probably one reason, but not an excuse to put a good social protection system. We identified some root causes because it's necessary to identify the root causes in terms of to find a solution to address to it. The first is, maybe the one point is we need for a rights-based approach, because in many countries, we discovered that in many countries, the system, the social protection programs are often not embedded in law. Second point is the point raised by my predecessor, Madam Isabel and Evelyn, about the underfunding of social protection system is one of maybe the big issue we need to the problem we need to solve. The third is the large informal economy, which is largely uncovered by the social protection program. And of course, we can have to have the the large contribution come from them because they are not beneficiary. That's informal economy workers, some migrant workers usually have not access to the social insurance schemes. We have also one, this is the weak governance and administration. Social protection system are not sufficiently implemented with regards of the governance, we've got the governance and administration. And also sometimes we discover in many countries in absence of tripartite social dialogue. As mentioned by Evelyn, it's very important to have a dialogue, you know, in the issue of the social protection and inefficiency of the administrative process. In some other country, we have not enough policy and institutional coordination. We have many, I think Isabel mentioned, we have many systems, social protection system, but we have not they have lack of coherence, and also sometimes they have not any coordination between all the systems. Now, what is the solution? I think except some, and if necessary, for many countries, it's necessary actually to restructuring the social protection systems. For example, to reforming the institution who is in charge of the social protection issue, but also we need to reform the model of the governing and monitoring, and to be sure to have a link between the social protection systems and the labor market. It's very important. But I think the big problem is, as mentioned by my predecessor, is to reforming the financing of social protection system. It's very, very important because it's maybe one of the solutions in terms of to have a good, strong social protection systems in our country as classified as low income countries. But as you say, if you say it's a low income country, you say there is a lack of finance. But that's why we need to innovate. And in innovation, I think I agree with the presentation made by Madame Isabel. I think there is, when we convinced our government that the social protection has a link with the economic growth. We said maybe despite the fears from some economists, the tax revenue raise real economic growth tends to improve tax revenue collection, and another way which in turn may be used to finance social protection investment. It's clear, I think there is, as mentioned by Evelyn, there is some stimulation where we can convince that the social protection the social investment can lead economic growth as well as the tax revenue. So I would like just maybe to present one example in my country where we use some innovative I think way to put in place the universal health insurance. It's called community-based health insurance, which cover actually in Rwanda almost actually maybe it's 99% of the population. We was taken around 10 years in terms of to establish it. There are many discussions. We have a dialogue with the government, a dialogue of the community. We have dialogue of the donors community. We have the dialogue with the local community in terms of to see how we can put in place that schemes. And actually we have it's called community-based health insurance scheme. And actually the contributions are made on an annual basis and based on the scaling system called Obudehe. The Ubudehe, it's in Rwanda, and is the national income categorization database, assign households into one of 6 categories based on their income and assets, and introduce the principle of solidarity and inclusion. And that CBHI, and contributed to improving its financial sustainability. Actually, the scheme is financed through various sources. You have the member contribution, we have the government subsidies, you have the external donors fund, but also we have the all health insurance schemes, especially the public health insurance scheme, and private contribute to that fund in terms of, to sustain that fund. That is one to say, since it start to work periodically, I think every 3 years, we had a broad discussion in terms of to readjust. And the big challenge is to sustain the fund. And actually, I think after three reform of that fund, actually, I think it's working well, and we can also actually, to estimate the average of 70% or the efficiency of health insurance scheme. For me, actually, we are working on a long-term savings schemes sponsored by the government is already established, but we take time, to run appropriately. That's why what I want to say, it's not, if you put some initiatives by law, it's not necessary in 1 year to say is work efficiency. No, sometimes it takes a long time. It needs many discussion. It needs dialogue between many people. And what I can conclude here is to say the 2 concrete examples of my country. I can take also the other example on the country. When we have the political will, the commitment of the civil society, trade unions, local community, and the trust from donors, community, everything is possible with a good implementation plan. I think at this stage, I would like just to stop, but before to stop, I want maybe to pass quickly and in 1 minute the 8 points mentioned by Isabel in terms of the 8 points of alternatives. I think we need especially to reinforce, especially for low-income country, is the first point, to relocating public expenditure is very necessary, to eliminating the spending inefficiency and to tackling the corruption. If the 1 point, if we work very hard on the 2 points, we can mobilize the fund for our social protection systems. Another point is very important to mention is the point in terms of eliminating illicit financial flows. To tackle the issue of money laundering, bribery, tax evasion, trade mispricing, and other financial crime must to be fight in terms of to see how to enlarge the fund is available in each country as actually classified as a low-income country. And maybe the last point, what I would like maybe to mention is the point 7, the point borrowing or restructuring existing debt. I think the question of the debt, especially in Africa, is actually, I think we need to see actually to discuss how to restructure the debt, or there is a debate actually in terms of to see if about the legitimacy of that debt actually is questionable. I think at this point, I think I can If there is some question, we can respond, but for me, it's okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Over to you,
Eric.
Cathy.
What a fantastic way to ground the framing that we heard from Isabel and Evelyn, and how that you're seeing this in Rwanda, what it means. And I know you now have a more regional position throughout Africa. You're going to be able to look at all of this, but I love the solution that you give as an example, and also that you underscore these solutions take a lot of dialogue. They take a lot of work if you are going to make sure they're inclusive and built to meet the needs of workers and their families, that they are based on solidarity, they're inclusive. So great example to share with us. And again, I think when we get to questions, you raise a lot of issues around the call for cancellation of debt, the current call around special drawing rights, and how to continue to create fiscal space for countries so they can actually invest in social protection. We are now going to turn, before we open it up for questions, to Adriana Paz-Ramirez. Before she speaks, I want to remind everyone to please go to your interpretation button on the bottom of your screen. If you do not speak Spanish, please make sure you click on English, and you will get interpretation for her presentation. Adriana is the Latin America Regional Coordinator of the International Domestic Worker Federation. It is the federation that represents 580,000 domestic workers globally. Her background is in sociology and labor migration and journalism, and she is originally from Bolivia. She has 16 years of experience as an activist and organizer, and she brings so much experience to the global domestic worker movement. So over to you, Adriana, and thanks so much for being with us.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, Cathy. ¿Sí me pueden escuchar en la traducción? Perfecto, gracias. Voy a salirme un poquito de la nota del inglés y vamos a cambiar al español, y le doy gracias a Cathy por permitirme esta flexibilidad. Bueno, decirles que las trabajadoras del hogar cada primero de mayo, escogen un tema, ¿no? Un tema para seguir luchando y resistiendo. Y este año escogieron el tema de protección social. Por supuesto, no es casual, porque la pandemia nos deja al expuesto toda la desprotección social en la que trabaja el sector. De hecho, en 1 hora y media más comienza nuestro webinar internacional en protección social. Así que es el día del 1 de mayo, el Día de la Protección Social. Cathy nos mandó 4 preguntas muy buenas para reflexionar, para guiar nuestra presentación. Entonces, una de sus preguntas era, ¿qué es diferente de los temas, de los problemas que confrontan comparado con 2 años atrás? Y es una pregunta y una respuesta muy amplia. Nosotras en la región de Latinoamérica hicimos un estudio de impacto sobre cómo ha afectado el COVID al sector del trabajo del hogar. Y voy a tomar de ese estudio para presentarles y responder a la pregunta de Cathy, ¿qué es diferente hace 2 años atrás? Hay muchas cosas que son muy diferentes y que nos llaman a pensar y repensar seriamente la reconstrucción de la economía con un enfoque de género donde la economía del cuidado está al centro y al frente, porque hemos visto la crisis de la economía del cuidado durante toda la pandemia. Contarles un poquito de que esta investigación fue realizada por las mismas trabajadoras del hogar. Ellas mismas hicieron las encuestas, los cuestionarios. Entonces es una investigación de base. Ellas mismas entendieron que es muy importante generar información desde la base para poder abogar, incidir con los gobiernos. Cuando hablamos de estadísticas y de datos duros es cuando los tomadores de decisiones y de políticas nos escuchan. Entonces voy a permitirme compartir la pantalla. ¿Ahí la ven? Perfecto, gracias. Les decía de que esta es gran parte de la investigación que hicieron las trabajadoras del hogar, esperen. ¿Cómo puedo cambiar? Ok, ahí. Participaron 14 países, 24 organizaciones y 2.700 encuestas respondidas en plena pandemia. Nosotras comenzamos la encuesta desde marzo a abril y teníamos el gran desafío de que en esa época en América Latina 95% de los países de la región estaban en cuarentena. Entonces había incapacidad de desplazarse físicamente y había falta de recursos de las compañeras para pagar las cuentas de teléfono y tener acceso a teléfono, WhatsApp, pero aún así, con todos estos desafíos, se llenaron casi 3.000 encuestas. Es un logro grande. Realmente darles una foto muy rápida de quiénes son las trabajadoras del hogar en América Latina. Decirles que son 18 millones de trabajadoras del hogar. Es la segunda región con la mayor concentración de trabajadoras del hogar en el mundo después de Asia. La mayor parte en algunos países andinos y afrodescendientes son indígenas, son mujeres negras, 17% son migrantes internacionales y el 14.3% de la población económicamente activa en América Latina trabaja en el sector del hogar. Es decir, de que es una fuente importante de trabajo para las familias latinoamericanas. El 77.5% de ellas trabajan en condiciones de informalidad, sin acceso a derechos laborales ni protecciones sociales. Aquí quiero hacer un punto importante. Muchas veces se dice que las trabajadoras del hogar pertenecen al sector informal. No, las trabajadoras del hogar están en una relación contractual. La Convención 189 de Trabajo Decente de la OIT para las trabajadoras del hogar define muy claramente qué es el trabajo del hogar, qué es una trabajadora del hogar y quién es un empleador. Entonces, estamos en una relación contractual. El hecho de que 77% de ellas trabajen en condiciones de informalidad es por la falta de implementación de la normativa, por la falta de implementación de la ratificación del convenio 189, por la falta de implementación de las leyes de seguridad social en los países. Esta es nuestra demanda para movilizar, por eso decimos no somos informales, pero por la falta de implementación trabajamos en condiciones de informalidad. Aprovecho para decir que 15 países ratificaron la Convención 189 de los 31 países a nivel mundial. Entonces es importante. Algunas características de quienes respondieron a esta encuesta. La mayor parte mujeres, 96% de ellas, 47% madres solteras, 84% son madres, el 68% de ellas tienen como su única fuente de ingreso familiar su trabajo, ¿no? El trabajo doméstico. Perdón, el 92% y para el 68% de ellas es la única fuente de ingreso. 70% sin contrato laboral, 62% sin seguridad social. Durante la pandemia, ¿qué pasó? Les quiero decir de que estos datos en el presente deben ser aún incluso peor. No nos pintan la realidad exacta. Esto es en abril y marzo del año pasado. El 49% de ellas fueron suspendidas, despedidas. 23% de ellas siguió trabajando normalmente. Normalmente significa sin protección contra el COVID y sin medidas de seguridad. El 14% de ellas siguió trabajando con pérdidas, significa con reducción de horas, con vacaciones adelantadas, ¿no? Y el 13% de ellas estaban en cuarentena remunerada, cuando debería ser un número mucho más grande. Un testimonio aquí que dice, las vacaciones anticipadas es ilegal, pero aceptamos estas irregularidades por necesidad. Ya que más de la mitad perdieron su trabajo, el hecho de no tener una cobertura social, tenemos un porcentaje de solamente 2% de ellas, de las que perdieron su trabajo, tenían acceso a las prestaciones de desempleo. Es decir, que pasaron de una situación difícil a una situación desesperada. Los efectos que tiene la pandemia. Estamos hablando de inequidad social, estamos hablando de inseguridad alimentaria, de pobreza y hambre. Como les decía, el 92% es su única fuente de empleo, el 68% es la única aportante de ingresos en su hogar Y por supuesto, al ser despedidas, y quiero decir que en muchos países la cifra de despidos llega hasta el 80%. En Brasil, en el sector del hogar, tenemos 1,8 millón de trabajadoras del hogar despedidas, lo cual significa, por supuesto, inseguridad laboral, se acentúan las deudas y las condiciones laborales empeoran. Aquellas que siguieron trabajando vieron sus derechos laborales vulnerados, vieron sus horas de trabajo aumentarse mucho, vimos casos de acoso y de violencia y maltratos. Afectada totalmente, sin trabajo, mi hija embarazada, nieta de 8 años, ya se terminaron los ahorros, hay que pagar arriendo, comprar gas y comida. Estamos realmente mal. Disculpen, porque no me deja pasar ya. Riesgos a la salud y la seguridad en el trabajo. El trabajo del hogar es una ocupación de alto riesgo y así tenemos que concebirla y así tienen que entenderla los gobiernos. La primera muerte por COVID en Brasil fue de una trabajadora del hogar negra de 63 años. Esto no es casual. El COVID tiene raza, tiene clase y tiene género. Esta trabajadora fue infectada por COVID después de que su empleadora regresó de un viaje de Italia. La empleadora tenía síntomas de COVID, se hizo el test y se quedó en cuarentena en casa con su trabajadora del hogar. Cleonice nunca fue testeada con COVID, pero murió con síntomas de COVID. Y ahora sabemos cómo está la situación del COVID en Brasil. Entonces, muchas de las muertes fueron de trabajadoras del hogar y de sus hijos. En general, la población de trabajadoras del hogar presenta una alta prevalencia de condiciones de comorbilidad, sobrepeso, diabetes, presión alta y cáncer. Si a esto le agregan que casi el 80% de ellas no está cubierta por la seguridad social, estamos hablando de inequidad social, de pobreza y de hambre. Falta de equipamiento, de protección para las trabajadoras del hogar. Al 45% de ellas no se les proporcionó equipos de protección. Al 47% de ellas no se les ha proporcionado ningún tipo de garantía para que se puedan trasladar de manera segura al trabajo y una presión para regresar a trabajar, ¿no? Disculpen, siempre tengo problemas para cambiar de slide. Este 47% opaca muchas disparidades regionales. El 47% es una cifra general, sin embargo, vemos que en Guatemala el 59% de trabajadoras no recibió personal, equipos de protección. Las cifras del 61% en Brasil, del 71% en El Salvador y el 74% en Colombia, ¿no? En promedio, el 4% se ha visto a compartir el espacio y cuidar a alguien probablemente infectado con COVID. Esta cifra es 10% en Paraguay y 7% en El Salvador y en Guatemala. Riesgos a la salud y a la seguridad en el trabajo. Como les decía, solamente el 47% de ellas dicen que no han adoptado medidas para garantizar su traslado al trabajo. El 57% de ellas viaja más de 1 hora en transporte público para llegar al trabajo. ¿Qué significa esto? Que en el transporte de su casa al trabajo están totalmente con el riesgo de empleo porque es imposible guardar sana distancia. Un testimonio de Perú nos dice que por falta de transporte acepté quedarme cama adentro, es decir, a trabajar y dormir en la casa, y llevo 46 días sin descansar. Me voy a saltar toda la parte de los esfuerzos y la maravillosa resiliencia y las conquistas que han hecho nuestras afiliadas en toda la región, porque soy consciente del tiempo. La FIT creó un fondo global de ayuda humanitaria. Me salto toda esa parte y un poco respondiendo a la pregunta de Cathy, ¿no? Preguntando en cómo debemos de repensar en la reestructuración, cómo nos vamos a reconstruir después de esta crisis que en sectores como el trabajo del hogar es trágica. Nosotros podemos concluir que durante la crisis durante la pandemia se evidencia una crisis de cuidados. Y junto a ella una gran contradicción estructural es revelada. Las trabajadoras del hogar son esenciales. En muchos países los gobiernos tuvieron ambigüedad. Algunos las declaran esenciales, otros no dicen nada, otros las declaran esenciales, pero en todo caso, sin protección social, en todo caso, sin hacer de que los paquetes de emergencia y de apoyo a la protección al empleo y la protección al salario lleguen al sector del hogar. Por el hecho de que trabajan en la informalidad, no habían registros de ellas en los ministerios de trabajo y por tanto no accedieron, muy pocas accedieron a los apoyos. Nosotras decimos que la reconstrucción real debe de pasar por reconciliar esta contradicción estructural. Se valora el trabajo del cuidado, pero no se valoran a las personas de manera efectiva, las personas que trabajan en el sector del cuidado. Las trabajadoras del hogar, independientemente de su nacionalidad y estatus migratorio, deben acceder a los programas de vacunación ahora. Y esa es nuestra pelea y por eso tenemos esta consigna en el 1 de mayo. Urge avanzar hacia una cultura de cumplimiento de legislación y mejoramiento de sistemas de fiscalización. Hagamos cumplir la ley, hagamos cumplir la normativa, hagamos cumplir las ratificaciones del convenio 189. Tenemos que seguir apoyando y visibilizando y fortaleciendo las organizaciones de trabajadoras del hogar y sus esfuerzos reivindicativos. En la práctica, compañeros, ellas y no los gobiernos han sido las que han dado un apoyo inmediato, práctico a sus afiliadas. Y a un año de la pandemia, que ya están volviendo todas a retomar el trabajo, urge medidas prácticas e inmediatas para atender a la situación de una situación de desempleo generalizado. Saben que las Américas ha sido el continente más golpeado en términos de desempleo y tenemos que asegurar que las medidas de apoyo de los gobiernos y programas de renta básica, gasto fiscal y promoción de empleo lleguen efectivamente a las trabajadoras del hogar que constituyen un 15% del sustento de las familias latinoamericanas. En ese sentido, las aportaciones de Isabel y de Evelyn y los ejemplos del compañero Eric son fantásticos porque de ahí podemos comenzar a imaginar de qué manera podemos revertir los impactos que vemos en un sector donde la mayoría son mujeres y están abajo de la pirámide laboral y de la estructura social. Cathy, disculpa, no sé si ya me pasé de la hora, yo termino aquí de compartir mi pantalla.
No, mil gracias. Thank you so much, Adriana. That was perfect. I think we went from this big frame of what we're trying to accomplish to really hearing and making visible the voices of your members, of domestic workers who are living day in and day out. I like some of your quotes. They went from a difficult situation that already existed pre-pandemic to a desperate situation during the current moment. And really the fact that, and helping us to understand, again, what the investment in social protection would mean, especially for domestic workers who, as you remind us, have, according to convention, and for people not familiar, it's the International Labor Organization Convention on Domestic Workers that does identify this contractual relationship. But we see that in many, many countries, as you say, Adriana, domestic workers are working very informally with very few protections, so many forced to work without, that example you used from Brazil is just so incredibly powerful, that a life was lost because her employer did not care enough to have her properly protected. Fantastic presentation. I hope you will also share your presentation, the rich research that you did with all of the domestic workers. So we have limited time. I want to open it up for questions. I want to hear people's ideas about how we can move this agenda forward. We have momentum. I'm going to go to Guillermo, your question that you've already put into the chat box. If I may answer a little bit of what is happening within the US context. Guillermo is asking, just days ago, we did hear President Biden speak in front of Congress. Beyond the political limits that a speech has, what's the consideration of social protection policies in the G20 and G7, and to leave the fiscal austerity policies? That is a huge, important question. I'll speak from the US and then turn it over to my other colleagues. But first of all, I should say that beyond the speech in front of Congress, we're seeing some real action happening. Walking the walk here in the United States, actually spending and not going the austerity route with the jobs plan, with the families plan, investing in the care infrastructure, which I think, as Adriana just laid out, is critical to our entire economy. we can't rebuild without investing and raising the floor for all domestic workers. One thing we are doing here in the United States is there is a coalition of us, and I see some of my colleagues on the call, Claude Fontheim and others, of business, labor, and civil society organizations coming together. We'll be putting a letter forward to the White House to ask that they join the Macron government in leading in the G7 and G20 spaces to support the call for a global social protection fund, which we think is just critical. And then the other issues that some have already mentioned, building off of what Eric has already talked about, in the US context, we are joining the global labor movement in the call for debt relief, in the call for special drawing rights, which is a process through the International Monetary Fund that would create some space for countries struggling to address the pandemic and spend on social protection programs. So I think your question, Guillermo, really gets to we need to do a whole set of things to create the space and ensure that we don't fall back into the failed austerity policies that we have seen from previous crises. But anyone interested in joining the work that we're doing here in the US, please feel free to reach out to me after this conversation. Any further questions before I turn some other questions back to the panel? We have so many issues that have been raised by the participants, but maybe I will, until I see some of any questions come in, maybe I will turn it back to the panelists. You know, we are in this moment building off of Guillermo's question, where we have a lot of opportunities coming up. We have the leaders going into the G7 and the G24, maybe starting back with Isabel and Evelyn, if you could give us a little bit of the state of play. What do you see? And this is a huge issue that we're trying to push forward. Where do you see some rays of hopes, continued challenge, and anything that those of us listening could be doing to do more work to pressure our leaders to respond correctly to this crisis?
Shall I come in,
Sure.
or do you want to go in first, Elizabeth?
Sure.
Isabel?
Either way, I cannot see you. And then Isabel, do you want to jump in, or Evelyn? And then we'll go to some questions for Eric and Adriana.
As you wish. What to say? It is indeed very important to try to influence the G20. The US actually can be a really, it would be so different now as it was in the last 5 years. So this is so much welcome when we hear President Biden. But still, I mean, the G20 is a number of countries, and what we are going to find, it is also the informal secretariat of the G20, which tends to happen by the OECD and the IMF. They are their vision. They tends to be pro-austerity. Now, so we are going to have here two positions. Actually three. One, that they will be saying that, we have to go to, macroeconomic stability is number one, and we have to go to austerity no matter what. Then there will be a moderate position. They will be saying, well, let's discuss austerity, okay? And they will be saying now it will be premature to enter into austerity cuts this year. And so it will be better to postpone that to a later moment. And but however, acknowledging that there will be, that debt and fiscal deficits are very high and austerity will have to happen. And the third position will be the really progressive one, and that will be ideal if we see it. And perhaps we'll find more hope for that position in countries like Argentina, within the G20. We'll see. I mean, there will be elections in Brazil, so we'll see what happens. It will be to say, no, we don't need austerity now. We don't need austerity ever, really. What we need to do is to really find new sources of fiscal space and have larger budgets for real public policies, for to have public services and social protection and and green investments and whatever is needed. And exploring, more aggressively these other avenues for financing. And that will be, of course, the progressive position that we want to do. We want to see. What to do there from our level? There is a global campaign to stop austerity. More than 500 organizations, of course, including ITUC and many others, have joined. It's called, you just look for the hashtag no austerity and you'll find many things there. So I think we can keep, it happens in several languages, and we can keep mobilizing, the need, that we don't need austerity at country level, and try to have national dialogues. That will be, I think, the way forward. So this does not happen at a high level, far away from people, but we bring that discussion to people and make it public.
Fantastic. And I'm putting some of these resources, and we just got Adriana's great link to her studies, and I just put in the hashtag no austerity. Great to know that we already have movement building around this. Evelyn, did you want to come in? And then I was going to turn a question to Adriana and to Eric.
Sure. I mean, as Isabel pointed out, I think the G20 is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of members. But I mean, it is true that with the new U.S. administration, as well as the recent change in the Argentine government, this is obviously progress in terms of governments that are recognizing the importance of public investment, and especially investment in social protection. Mexico as well is a country that is actually stepping up its social protection programs rather considerably with the new government. Maybe not so new now, but and what I also find interesting is that the government of France in particular has really taken up this issue around the Global Social Protection Fund, and seems to be also promoting this within the G20 process. Perhaps many of you know that the labor unions, we are very involved also in terms of the G20 dialogue with labor ministers and general advocacy throughout the G20 discussions, preparations through what is called the L20. It's the Labor 20, the representatives of labor unions across G20 countries. So this is something that that the L20, social protection in particular, has been strongly promoted by. The L20 is strongly promoting social protection and the establishment of a global fund. We had a preparatory meeting before the labor ministers meeting. They have what you call employment working groups. There are 3 preparatory meetings that lead up to the labor ministers for the G20 meeting. We've been part of that. It seems like there is some interest in the G20 saying something around enhanced international solidarity for social protection, but that is of course to be confirmed. What I can say in terms of what we are encouraging our members to do is really lobby your G20 Sherpa, lobby your G20 labor minister, lobby your development minister on the importance of the establishment of a global social protection fund, underlining that the G20, as the group of richest countries in the world, have actually, this is a great coordination opportunity in terms of bringing together financing from these wealthy countries. And what I can also say is that we've been teaming up with our civil society allies and our academic allies in doing G20 lobbying, also through what's called the C20. We are part of a global coalition for social protection floors that has put forward an open letter lobbying the G20 for a global fund, and I'll put the link in the chat, and perhaps that can inspire you also to lobby your own national governments.
That's fantastic. So lots of lobbying. And again, I put my email in. We've created a coalition here in the United States. We're going to be lobbying the US government, both for the Global Social Protection Fund and increased spending on social protection programs across the State Department, Department of Labor, and USAID. I know we're running out of time. I do, though, want to take this back down and see, ask Eric and Adriana, so as we do lobby our ministers, how do you also see social protection as an opportunity for some cross-movement organizing, some transnational organizing? It really is an issue that's the glue in so many of our movements, whether you're part of the domestic worker movement, You're working on just transition and climate issues. How do you see this? And we only have a few minutes left. So if I could ask you a couple minutes on how you see social protection supporting the organizing work you're doing, if not expanding it. Over to you, Eric, and then Adriana, you get the final word today. Eric.
Thank you. Okay. I would like to respond to the question, but what I can say, if I understand well, I capture the question. The question of the social protection is one of the issue actually is I think more easy to discuss and to negotiate and to create the space for dialogue with the government, with the business community, and also with the local community, because every time it's not obvious to have the local community on the side of the trade unions, because sometimes the trade movement, the working class sometimes are, especially the trade movement, sometimes, you know, the people be afraid of some action, because sometimes the trade union movement is considered as, you know, the reactive movement, etc. But the question of a social protection issue is one the point which is actually very, very easy to negotiate, and we have many breach actually is open. It's not only in my country, but in many countries in Africa, actually, they are open to discuss about, especially after this crisis on COVID-19 pandemic, which all the people discovered, but that's our social protection systems are not efficient. I think that's the response I can do. But I have also one on the question, excuse me, when the question come from one of the participants, maybe I can respond in the chat. The question comes.
Yeah, I think you have a question on land, and maybe you can put that in the chat. That's fantastic. I do, and I think, you know, you really note, Eric, that it's when we talk about the opportunities that come out of crises, I think this is one of them, where, you know, many of us in the labor movement and other movements have seen this crisis, as, you know, as Adriana so perfectly put, it was already difficult for the majority of workers who didn't have protections, and this crisis really has just created a spotlight on these issues. Adriana, how do you see this in terms of your own work to build movements? Does this help expand, making the connections with some of the gender-based violence work I know that your movement's working on, the climate work? How do we see social protection fitting into the organizing and activism that you are doing?
Thank you, Cathy. No need to do the switch to the Spanish channel. I'm saying in English. I think this is a perfect opportunity to unite us all, and also around care work and domestic work. I think everyone is connected to care work. At some point in your life, you have received care and you have given care, and you will need care. This in itself, it's a point that connects us all. This interconnectedness, it's crucial to understand that we all need care. If we think on that way, there are so many groups, like for example, employers groups, those employers who need care assistance for either the people in their families with disabilities, or for the elderly, or for the children. So why not bringing us together, coalitions of employers, coalitions of workers, to understand that we all need protection for care, and social protection is exactly that. I think it really opens up an opportunity to talk about radical ideas, like the protection of the society, that without the protection of society, we wouldn't live, and therefore the economies wouldn't thrive. So I think we see so clearly that now is the time.
What a great point to end on. I like thinking that this is somehow a radical notion that we care for all workers, and that we take this moment of crisis to learn from our failures in the past of supporting austerity measures, not taking times of crisis to really transform what has been wrong for so many years for working people, and really rebuild with resilience. I am so grateful that we have had this panel today as part of the Calmanovitz Institute's conference on rethinking precisely what you just said, Adriana, a new vision, a new social contract for working people. And I hope that we can continue this rich conversation. I do believe it's an opportunity for us to build bridges amongst ourselves and to really build towards not only a global social protection fund at the global level, but making sure that everyone in our countries has the social protection that they need. I want to thank our speakers today, Isabel, Evelyn, Eric, and Adriana. Thanks to those that stayed up late to join us. Greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to continuing this conversation here in the US. I'll sign off by saying the AFL-CIO, working with business and development groups, we're committed to making sure that the United States leads on this incredibly important issue at the global level and in the at the US level for all working people. Thanks again for the conversation, for everyone's participation, and take care, and thanks to the Georgetown organizers. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.